Good afternoon, my name is John Webb and welcome to Have Bronco Will Travel, a video series aimed at documenting the process of restoring this brand new 1979 Ford Bronco. Now before we talk more about this specific Bronco, let's spend a minute talking about Ford Broncos in general. Now the Ford Bronco was released as a first generation model in 1966. It was released as a higher powered alternative to the Jeep, and it was also released specifically for outdoorsmen, people who wanted to go off-road and go into some really rough conditions. It was meant to be a rugged, durable vehicle first and foremost. It was a small vehicle, very nimble, and a square body vehicle, and the customers loved it. It sold not necessarily the greatest sales of Ford, but it sold very well. And they sold it from 1966 to 1977. So it sold for 11 straight years. Now, in that time frame, competitors to Ford, such as Chevy and International, decided to release their own versions of sport utility vehicles. Now, their designs were a bit different, and instead of being a small, nimble vehicle, they decided to release a larger set of vehicles. So the International Travelall and the Chevy Blazer were perfectly good examples of that. Now, as Ford was losing market share, they realized we're going to have to catch up, and Ford needs to release a second generation model. This model needed to be bigger so it could fit families who want to take weekend warrior trips, but still suit those who want to go into the backcountry and go rock crawling. That led to the development of this model you see behind me right here, which was only sold in 1978 and 1979. Now the gross weight of that vehicle went up from about 2,000 pounds gross weight to, in this case, 4,500 to 4,700 pounds. So it was a much, much bigger vehicle. Now the downside of the second generation vehicle is this all happened when the EPA was coming into its own. In that time frame, the EPA released environmental regulations to reduce smog emissions from vehicles. The problem with this vehicle is it was already slated to hit the market with the legendary 351 motor. Now the 351M could reach horsepower as high as 300 horsepower. But without designing a brand new engine, all they could do was modify the 351. So they modified it by reducing the compression ratio. Now that did indeed reduce the nitrous oxide emissions, so it would actually be compliant with law. The downside is it neutered the power of the engine. So the M version, or the 351M engine that is in this vehicle, only produces about 150 horsepower. In addition, it wildly reduced the gas mileage. So the gas mileage went down to about 5 miles per gallon, and that was on a good day. On a bad day, the gas mileage could be as little as 3 miles per gallon. Now that's all going to depend on how well your carburetor is tuned, but that was kind of a nail in the coffin for this vehicle. People didn't like that, especially being a higher weight vehicle. It didn't perform as well at high altitudes and didn't perform as well going up steep hills. For that reason, as well as many others, Ford eventually realized that they needed to come up with a third generation Bronco, which was released in 1980. However, unlike the first and second generation Broncos, which were marketed specifically to be durable, rugged vehicles for people who are off-road enthusiasts, they decided to start incorporating design features that were more consistent with people who wanted to make the Bronco a daily driver. So better gas mileage, smoother ride, better on-road performance. However, that sacrificed a lot of its off-road capability, and people didn't like that. So the third generation did not sell as well as the previous two generations. However, Ford continued to evolve the designs, and they eventually released a fourth generation and fifth generation vehicle, but it never quite recaptured the magic of the first two generations of vehicles. So the production line ended in 1996 with the fifth generation Bronco. However, Bronco enthusiasts are rabid, and so they kept pestering Ford to release a new model, and in 2001, Ford gave in. So in 2001, Ford released the sixth generation Bronco. Now they still wanted to maintain the features of the previous Bronco models that were good for on-road performance and as daily drivers, but they wanted also to combine it with all of the rigors for off-road enthusiasts, which they did. And it's actually a very good vehicle. You'll see a lot of YouTube videos with people going out to Moab and taking it into some really rigorous locations. However, because the first generation and the second generation Broncos were designed specifically for off-road enthusiasts, there is still a passion for these first two generations of vehicles. For that reason, these vehicles, if they're in good condition, can be very, very expensive. So the first generation Bronco, if you find one in good stock condition, that can sell for as high as $150,000. If you find one that's been modified so it's in great condition but has modern conveniences in it, that can sell for as high as $300,000. Now the second generation vehicle isn't quite valued that high, but it's catching up quick. And so a good stock vehicle, second generation Bronco, like this one behind me, will sell for as high as $80,000. If you get these with a lot of modern conveniences installed in them, they will go as high as $200,000. Now, because these were only produced for 2 years as opposed to 11 years, I do expect these second generation Broncos to overtake the value of the first generation Broncos. Now, the next question is, why did I want one, especially one that needs to be fixed up? Well, the answer is simple. My grandfather had one of these. I have a lot of great memories of traveling to Maine to visit my grandfather and getting in the back of his second generation Bronco as we would tour the Indian Pond Road looking for moose, or he would take me to fishing holes and teach me how to fly fish. I have great memories of that, and I very much want to restore a Bronco that kind of recaptures that spirit. So with that, I decided this year I was going to finally pull the trigger, and I wanted to buy a Bronco that was in the best condition possible, but we just discussed prices, and I don't want to pay $80,000. So I realized I was going to have to buy something not quite at that level, but the two check marks I had for it is it has to be little rust. And by little rust, I don't mean doesn't have rust, but most of the rust has to be surface rust that can be sanded off. Doesn't mean that there cannot be some rust holes, but it has to be something manageable. The second checkbox is it has to be a Bronco that starts pretty easily. So I came across a person on Facebook Marketplace who lives in Bozeman, Montana, that was selling a Bronco. So I bought it sight unseen in December of this year, or partially bought it. I paid $3,500 down payment for a $7,000 Bronco. And I went out there in January to complete the inspection, and once I passed that inspection, offered the remaining $3,500 and transferred the title to myself. Now this vehicle does have rust. It appears that this has been a Montana Bronco its entire life. It was owned by a ranching family who both used it and kind of abused it. You'll see a lot of dings on this. And they drove it till about the year 2000, and then they parked it in a farm field, and it hadn't been started since then. So the first time this was started was probably late 2025, so late last year. And that was by the gentleman who bought it and made some minor upgrades just to make it runnable, and then he sold it to me. Now, when I bought this vehicle in January of this past year, it was 8 degrees below zero. And that's a great litmus test for a carbureted vehicle, because carbureted vehicles don't start well at below zero temperatures. But this vehicle started right up with absolutely no problems. So basically I was sold and I bought the vehicle. However, I didn't drive it home. I put it on a flatbed and I drove it home. When I got it home, despite the fact it did not drive here, it wouldn't start. It took me about an hour of finagling with the engine before it would start, and frankly, I don't know what I did that made it start. But it did start, but it didn't run well. So the vehicle ran really rough, it ran really loud, it was releasing smoke not from the exhaust, but underneath the vehicle, and it was very pungent. So that indicates to me that there's a crack in the plumbing underneath the vehicle. So the piping going from the engine all the way to the tailpipe, it's got a crack, and as a result, it's not making it to the muffler and it's not making it to the catalytic converter. So I got to get that fixed. In addition, when it did start, if I took my foot off the accelerator, it would stall. That also indicates to me that I have a carburetor problem. It's probably running too rich. Now those are both things I can fix pretty easily, and I did look underneath the vehicle. I didn't see any cracks, but I did see 2 exhaust pipes that were put together that are missing a clamp and they're not welded together. So that is probably responsible for the exhaust problem. But I am looking forward to fixing this vehicle up and getting it in a great state. Now this is probably the most important thing. Every vehicle that you care about deserves a name. This vehicle is absolutely no different. So after a lot of thought, I've decided to name this vehicle Margot. Now Margot's not my wife's name, it's not my mother's name, it's my dog's name. Margot's my dog. She's an Australian Shepherd mix, and she is absolutely the best friend that any man could ever hope to have. So it felt natural to name the vehicle after her. I do intend on actually painting her name on this vehicle right here when this is finally fixed up and repainted. So with that said, let's go ahead now and take a look at the vehicle and document the initial state, and I look forward to more of these videos with you. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and start looking at the vehicle from the front. And so what we're staring at here is the front windshield, which is obviously going to have to be replaced, not just because of age, but it's cracked. But there are a couple of things to note here that I think are important when it comes to the character of the vehicle. The previous owners were indeed ranchers, and they have several stickers on the vehicle that I think give the vehicle character, like this one right here. Now, I would like to maintain those stickers, but I don't think I'm going to be able to keep those. So I am going to try and take pictures of them, see if I can get them reproduced, and put them back in the exact locations that I found them. Now, if we back off here, let's take a look at the front hood. Now, the front passenger side hood looks like it's in pretty good condition, so I'm not too worried about that. If you come back to the passenger side, though, there are a few micro dents that I'm fairly certain can be pulled out, but you should be cognizant of those. Now, to back up a little bit, we can talk about the fender of the vehicle. Now, the fender is in a bit of a different state. The fender has a lot of micro dents all across it, particularly bad over here on the driver's side. In addition, the grille is just cheap plastic, and as you can see, it's not in good condition. So that's all going to have to come out. Now, one thing I do like is this bumper with the brush guard. So I would like to see if I can restore this as opposed to replacing it. It does have some deformation here, but I think we can fix that. So I'm going to try and do my best with that as I can. Now let's go around to the passenger side. So the passenger side panels, they look like they're in pretty good condition. Now there are places that there is surface rust, but I do believe that surface rust can be sanded off and we can completely restore these panels. As we get further back, it's pretty evident that there has been some dents here. With those dents has come some rust. I think that can be popped out, but if not, we may have to consider replacing this panel. Now let's go a little bit further back here. Now in the rear of the vehicle, the tailgate is not in perfect condition, but I do think it's in serviceable condition. So it has some dings here and there, and it doesn't always sit flush the way that it should. I believe that can be repaired, but if it cannot, we will have to look at replacing the tailgate. In addition, I think this is important, is this second generation Bronco comes with a swiveled tire rack. Not all second generation Ford Broncos have this. If they don't have it and you want one, you're probably going to have them custom made because these are so hard to find. So I'm very grateful that this Bronco does indeed have that. Now if we kind of go a little bit back here, again taking a look at the tailgate, over here it doesn't sit flush the way that it should. In addition, we're missing the Ford lettering, so that will have to be replaced as well as the trim. Now another thing, and I don't know what this is called, but there's a piece of sheet metal that extends out, and that is what the bumper is attached to. So you can see that is cracked, and so that's going to have to be torn out and new sheet metal welded into it. Another thing, and I'm not 100% sure about this, but I don't believe that all Ford Broncos came with a towing option. So this one does have that. I'm glad to have that because we will be using that and towing some things. But there are some repairs at the rear of the vehicle that are going to happen. Now, in addition, when we get to the driver's side, the panels are in very, very good condition until you get up to the driver's side door. It looks like someone inserted some type of rod in here, maybe even a stick, and then opened the vehicle with that inserted, and that deformed the metal. So that is going to have to be replaced. In addition, you'll see this on both the driver and passenger side. This is an aftermarket floodlight that can be actuated from inside the vehicle, but it is aftermarket, and they had to puncture a hole in the cabin in order to install it, which I'm not really sure I like that, so I may be pulling that out. Another thing worth talking about is the fiberglass top that is removable. It's in decent condition. On the top of it, it does have wear. I wouldn't even call it wear and tear. It has weathering that I would expect as a function of age. So I think I can completely refurbish this, but we'll find out as we get there. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the interior of the vehicle, and let me go ahead and get a light out that makes it a bit easier to see. Now, one thing you'll notice is The door does set pretty flush, not perfectly, but it doesn't open as well as it should. So that's going to have to be reset. The panels, the plastic panels on the doors are all pretty much torn up, so that's going to have to be replaced. However, the sheet metal that it rests on is in pretty good condition. The next thing you'll notice is the passenger side and driver's side seats are in really bad condition. These probably can be restored from the frame of these. However, I do intend on replacing these seats. It's either going to be replaced with a bench style seat, or it's going to be replaced with high back captain's chairs. I think I prefer the high back captain's chairs, mostly because we're going to have our dog in the back of the vehicle, and she's going to want access to mom and dad. So having that section between the two seats that she can get into is going to be really nice. The floor pan, not the best condition on the driver's side. One thing you're going to notice is there are rust holes that go completely through. I have been under the vehicle and I can see the rust holes from the underside. I don't see that any place else in the vehicle, but I won't know for sure until we get all of the carpet and matting pulled out of the vehicle. So let me go ahead and take a seat on the interior so you can see what we're working with here. So the dash, let me try and get lighting here. The dash is not in the greatest condition, so it's all cracked on the top here. That's going to have to be taken out. The gauges, though, look like they're all serviceable, so those will be kept. There are places you can see the air conditioning was taken, or at least the vent was taken out of the vehicle. The stock radio was also torn out. I'm not sure what that is that goes below the radio. I think I'll have to check on that, but a lot of things have been pulled out, although the metal is in pretty good condition. You can kind of see the passenger side panel, still pretty bad condition. Now, one thing that's worth highlighting is the 4-speed manual transmission and the mechanism by which you select 4-wheel versus 2-wheel drive. All going to have to be looked at and serviced. So, forgive the jitters. I'm going to try and go to the back here. The back seat's not in horrible condition. You can see it's got chunks taken out of it. It's serviceable in the sense that if you want to tear the cushions off and have that restored from the frame, absolutely can do that. Probably going to do that, but I will say I'm not going to have the same color scheme. In fact, I'm going to go with the Indian blanket style. Another thing that you'll notice is it looks like the previous owner did install an aftermarket stereo system. That's certainly going to be coming out. I think it's my intention to see if we can put speakers in the door panels. We'll figure out how that's going to work. I'm not going to climb all the way into the back. I am going to say, you can maybe see it here. There are some rust holes in the sheet metal on the rear tailgate. So that's going to have to be completely torn out, welded back in. And obviously all of the plastic molding here, that's going to be taken out and completely restored. It is also my hope that I will be putting a roll bar in here as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shut down the camera for a second. And when I restart the camera, we're going to be underneath the vehicle so I can show you a few things that are in the known state. We'll see you under the vehicle. All right, so I'm underneath the vehicle now. I'm hoping this can be put in focus, but what we're staring at right now is part of the exhaust piping between the engine and the muffler. So what I'm looking at here is there are two pipes that look like they're bolted in place, or not bolted, but looks like they've been screwed in place. You can see that it looks like it did have a compression ring around it to kind of further hold it in place and protect the space between the pipes, but they're absolutely not welded together. So if you remember me saying that when we started the vehicle, we were having problems with exhaust coming out from underneath the vehicle, I have a suspicion that this is the problem right here, because I don't see any cracks anyplace else. So that's one thing I do want to document in the known state. Now let me go ahead and flip to a different angle. It does look like the previous owner put a new muffler in the vehicle, so hopefully we'll be able to reuse that, but we will see when we get to taking a look at everything underneath the vehicle. Now, another thing that I think is really important is the rear axle. Now, I believe this is a Ford 9-inch axle, but it is leaking differential fluid that you can see here. So that's something we're going to have to contend with when we refurbish the axle. Now I've looked at the front axle, which I believe is a Dana 66, and it looks like it's in pretty good condition, but it is still going to have to be completely sanded down and repainted with modern rust protection. Now underneath the vehicle, I'm not going to show it all because there's just not a ton of clearance underneath here. Everything has surface rust on it, but not that bad. In fact, I don't think it's any worse than my current Nissan Frontier that I'm driving. So I think a lot of this is going to be pretty easy to maintain. But again, when we get everything off the chassis, that's what we're going to find out for sure. So I'm going to go ahead and shut the camera off now. I'm going to come out front and we'll have a greater discussion on what I'm going to do with this Bronco. Now let's go ahead and pop the hood and see what we have underneath here. All right, so here we are now. We're looking at the engine bay. I don't think there's too much to say about the engine. The engine looks exactly like I would expect a 47-year-old engine to look like, especially one that was parked for about 20 years. I did mention that I do think there are problems with the carburetor underneath here, so we'll get to that eventually. Eventually I'll also pull the engine out and completely clean everything so I get a better look at it, but the engine is in working condition right now. Another thing that probably will demand an initial look is the master cylinder and the vacuum assist here. So they're rusty. Again, I would not expect that to be different for as long as this was parked. The brakes do work, but they felt that they didn't quite have the stiffness I would expect of the brakes. So gonna pull those, refurbish those, and see what we can do with that. Finally, in a normal Ford Bronco, right here, you would expect to see the windshield wiper reservoir. That's not in the vehicle, so I'm going to have to get one and install it, but that's going to be work forward. So not too much to say about the engine other than it's a standard 351M. All right, now that we've taken a look at the vehicle and we've documented the initial state, let's talk about what we're going to do with it in the long run. However, before we really go into that, there are probably a couple of things I need to throw out there. So number one is I do not know the first thing about automotive mechanics. Now I'm an engineer, so I think I do learn quick, but I don't know anything right now. So if I state anything with absolute authority in a video about how to do something, odds are I probably just learned 5 minutes before making the video. Now that said, I'm a little bit intimidated by the things I need to learn, but I'm also looking forward to it and the idea that I have total knowledge of my vehicle. So if you see me do something in one of these videos that you think can be done differently, or if you think is wrong, as long as you're being constructive, please let me know. In fact, I'd very much like to hear your thoughts on that. Now the other thing is, as you saw, this is a 4-speed manual transmission. Well, guess what? I do not know how to drive a manual transmission vehicle, so I have some stick shift driving lessons in my future. Now that said, the long-term vision for this vehicle is it is going to be a total frame-off restoration, which is going to make it expensive, and I'm only going to be able to afford to do what I can do when I can do it, which will probably extend the time frame to complete all this work. Now I would like to do as much of it as I can right here in my garage, but I live in a normal suburban house in a normal suburban garage, and I only have so much space, especially because my wife uses this garage. She puts her gardening stuff in the garage, and we have to share that space. So for that reason, a lot of the maintenance I'm going to have to take someplace else and pay someone else to do that work for me, as much as it pains me, but that's going to have to happen. Now the other thing is, as we discussed earlier, the vehicle was not completely in running condition when we got it back here. That's a problem because my driveway is on a slope, and as it turns out, my garage is also designed to have a bit of a slope in it. So if the vehicle's not working, I can't just push it back in the garage. So wherever I take it, if it's not in running condition when I take it someplace, when I bring it back, it has to be in running condition just so I can drive it back into the garage. Now that said, the intent is when all the work is done, this vehicle should look like a brand new vehicle. In addition, I would like it to have all of the amenities that a Bronco Ranger Edition has, even though this is only a Bronco Custom Edition. I also plan on putting about 2 inches of lift in it and going to 32 or 33-inch light truck tires. Now the one area that's, well, 2 areas that are kind of outstanding are paint scheme and powertrain. Now in the paint scheme, currently it has a 2-tone red and white paint scheme. Part of me wants to maintain that, even though the current scheme cannot be capped, it's going to have to be sanded down, but I would potentially like to repaint it in the same color scheme. However, I'm also very partial to metallic jade. Now, metallic jade was a color scheme that was only available for the 1978 second generation Bronco, so it's really not a 79 Bronco color scheme, but I really like it as a monotone as opposed to having a two-tone. The nice thing about green is, it does absorb some sunlight to, warm the vehicle up, but not as much as being a black vehicle. So it's nice for that. And in addition, this is not going to be a showpiece. We are going to drive this around, and we're not going to put it on a flatbed and take it to a destination. We're going to drive it to that destination, and then we're going to go off-road. And so green probably does a better job at hiding dirt versus the red and white paint scheme. So I'm still on the fence with that, but I would love to know your thoughts, because that's going to completely change our perspective of what type of seats I'm going to put in there, what is going to be the color scheme of the seats and the cushions and things like that. Now, the other thing is powertrain. Now, I mentioned to you that the 351M, which is what it currently has, is completely neutered in power. It's not even going to maintain the highway speeds that you have out west. It can probably reach a top cruising speed at a reasonable RPM of about 50 to 55 miles per hour. But here, to go to destinations, I have to get on the highway and drive 80 miles per hour. So I need a lot more power, and I need that power to be delivered at a lower RPM. So for that, I am considering going to a 460 big block engine or a modern Ford 7.3 liter engine, also known as the Godzilla engine. Now, in a lot of ways, I love the idea of a Godzilla engine. It's modern. You can take it to a Ford dealership, they will maintain it for you, it's highly reliable, and it has very good fuel efficiency. Now, the downsides to this is it is a very expensive engine to buy and install. Part of the reason the installation is really expensive is because it is a computerized engine, and if a signal lead does not get a return, it will just shut the engine down. So you have to have someone install it with a computer system to receive those signals and actually respond to them. Otherwise, your vehicle won't work. In addition, while it's a highly reliable engine, maintenance is expensive. In addition, I will not be able to maintain it myself, so I will have to go to a dealer and get in the queue for whenever they have time to fix it. So the downtime for fixes is possibly longer, and maintenance, when it does happen, while it should be infrequent, will be expensive. Now, on the flip side, the Ford 460 big block is completely maintainable in my garage, or at least mostly maintainable. So I can do the maintenance myself, but it is a less reliable engine. So maintenance will be more frequent, but each time maintenance occurs should be substantially cheaper than doing maintenance on a Ford 7.3. So that's the question, is which one wins out? Less frequent maintenance, but more expensive maintenance, or more frequent maintenance that is less expensive? Now, in addition, because I can work on the vehicle myself, I don't have to get in the queue, so the downtime to fix something should be less. Now, the other thing that would factor into that is fuel economy. The modern Ford 7.3 engine is a fairly fuel-efficient engine for its horsepower class. In fact, it might be one of the most efficient engines. So there's a lot of reasons, with fuel prices being as expensive as they are now, to want to use that engine. But the fuel economy of a 460 big block may be good enough, even though it's lower. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Now, when I do this maintenance, it's going to occur in 3 phases. And the first phase is, without running the vehicle, do everything that I can do myself in this garage, which is going to mean pulling the carburetor, rebuilding the carburetor, probably pulling the master cylinder, refurbishing the master cylinder and the vacuum assist. I might put some intermediate brake lines in, since the ones that are there now are probably 40 years old. Filling up the brake fluid, making sure that the brakes work, cleaning as much as I can of the vehicle, probably putting it on some jacks, getting underneath it, pulling the axles, both the front and the rear, completely refurbishing those. Also probably putting disc brakes on the rear axle. Now, with the disc brakes is probably going to come the addition of Hydro Boost or something of that like. I don't know yet. I mean, I know generalities about it, but I'm going to figure it out when I get there. So I'm going to try and do all of that here in this garage. Now, for phase 2, I'm going to have someone come pick it up, put it on a flatbed, and take it to a body shop that will take the frame off the body and take everything off the chassis, sand the chassis down, repaint the chassis with modern rust protective coatings, and then start rebuilding it from there. So new fuel lines, new brake lines, probably pulling out all of the exhaust pipes, putting new ones in, welding those in place, probably new muffler. Also, if the leaf springs have not been replaced, do that, put it on lift. Everything that needs to be done underneath it, such that when it comes back here, the undercarriage of the vehicle either looks brand new or is brand new. Now with that, it has to come back in working order, so we need to make sure that that is indeed the case. Then go into phase 2. Now phase 2 is going to be pulling the engine out, completely cleaning the engine, inspecting it, making sure I don't need to rebore the engine. Now I will rebore it, but because I am planning on replacing it, I would like to try and minimize that work, because it's going to be money kind of thrown in the hole just to keep it running in the short term. So with that, I'm going to do all the work I can, pull everything out of the interior, get it prepped for the third phase, which is putting it back on a flatbed, taking it to a body shop, and completely restoring the body. So that means replacing panels or fixing panels, pulling all of the interior dash out, replacing what needs to be replaced, but making sure that from a body perspective, everything is in impeccable order. And for that, I know we're going to have to cut things out and replace it with some welded in sheet metal. So that's going to happen. And with that will be a total repaint. And I don't just want to repaint it, I want to have, you know, some of the more classic 70s paint schema that you would have in that time frame. So I think that's the long run of the vehicle. I'm looking forward to doing it. I would love to get this done in about 2 years, but typically speaking, when I make a plan, things are about 50% longer, so we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'm looking forward to sharing all of this with you, and it's my intent to share the most tiny details, how things are done, so you can figure out how to do this yourself. In addition, I also want to be very open about the cost of everything. So right now, I bought this vehicle for $7,000, and between going up there, picking it up, bringing it back, hotels, buying a lot of the tools that I'm going to need and getting set up for it, I'm probably at about $8,500 total cost right now. So we're going to see where this goes, and I look forward to sharing this time frame with you. Thank you very much. I'm John Webb, and this is Have Bronco Will Travel.